Hi, I lost my job whilst providing for a 4 and 2-year-old, and I bounced back. And I want to share that story with you. So I'd been at this company, this organisation for 10 years. And I'd already experienced a voluntary redundancy previously, about 12 years before this happened. And that had its own challenges, but I was a lot younger, didn't have any kids, I wasn't married. I was actually with my wife at the time, but we had only just started going out, so there was a lot less pressure. And in some ways, it felt like a lot more opportunity. But this time round, the redundancy came about because of um, the the place where I was working at wanted to get rid of one of their sites, and I was working at that site, and they're looking at someone else taking over that site. And in the sort of 18 months before this all happened, I had a period of burnout which led to a period of depression, um, which was a challenge in itself. But I had got through that, that period, and then went straight into this redundancy process. So I was feeling a little bit weak, confidence wise, not great, um, but sort of recovering from where I was. But the process wasn't necessarily straightforward. Um, I had some very challenging conversations through that period. Um, speaking to the potential of taking over the site and how we possibly could fit into that process, into their how we could fit into that organisation. Um, and in some ways, I was trying to bid for my own job, and I was trying to keep things together at home with my two young boys at the time, my wife, who was staying at home. So there was a lot of pressure on me to try and make the right decisions because I was the only one bringing any money at the time. Um, and there was a hell of a lot of pressure on on me at the time. And I think during that time I probably did rely on maybe drink too much to ease some of the stress. And I wasn't looking after myself as well as I could do. And it was, and I felt like I was a bit disconnected from my role as a father, from my connection to my kids and to my wife. And having gone through a period of depression sort of 2 years before, if in some ways it felt similar, but it was a different experience, different in some ways. But it's one of the toughest things I've had to do in in trying to find the right path throughout that redundancy process. So that would be, the difficult conversations that I was having with uh, my senior manager, my chief exec, um, finding what the right path was, or should I stay? Should I fight for my role, or was it time to leave? You know, and try and find something else. And my role was, in some ways, quite specialised because of the the work sector I was in, and it. I suppose I got to a point where I felt like I'd had enough. Going through another redundancy, and this time it was compulsory. I felt like I can't do this anymore. I can't work there anymore. Um, and probably the biggest mistake I made during that time was I didn't seek out any help, sort of whether that's professional or just someone who could have that was outside of the family, that could have been there as a sounding board for what I was thinking. And part of me regrets that, because if I had done that, then I may well have made different choices. Maybe not necessarily to stay, or but in terms of where I went next. And I suppose I tried to do it on my own, and that still stings a bit. That I think I would have made different choices if I'd seeked out support outside of the family. So, what happened during the redundancy period was I was offered a role, but it would have meant relocating, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to sort of move to a place where I had no interest in living, and I wasn't convinced by the role itself. I ended up accepting the redundancy, and it was, the feeling of accepting that. Okay, with a bit of money, but it wasn't a lot. It really wasn't a lot of money, and I had to find another job. It was very scary. I've got a mortgage to pay, got a wife and two little boys to provide for, and there were some very long nights thinking about, well, what am I going to do? Um, and I did brush up on my resume and my CV, and I had some interviews, but I was going to those interviews with no confidence whatsoever. I can still, remember those interviews, into them, and would I have employed me? No, I had no confidence. Yeah, I had been drained. It had been taken away. I think that what happened the 18 months before and what I was going through, it really, it really drained me of what was I good at. And so I ended up working for Royal Mail as a postie, because it just felt like I needed to get out of what was a predominantly based office job into something completely different. But reflecting on this, or that part of my life now, it's really reminding me of just where my confidence had just diminished, and it took me a long time to start to refine that confidence. And that job felt like an escape. Felt like it sort of paid enough money just to get by, but it had lost. I'd lost a lot of drive in that period, and I didn't go back into management for about another sort of 5 or 6 years until I ended up going back into Royal Mail. management. And by doing that, finding my confidence and growing that again, and realizing the value that I did have in my previous career. So why share this? Why should I share this with you? I suppose I just wanted you to know that even when you may be at your lowest professionally, if you've got maybe the pressures of having a young family, or potentially there is a redundancy on the horizon that you're aware of. If I could change things, I would have taken a lot more control over that situation. Doubled down on the confidence that I did have, and to leave on my own terms more than their terms. That's not always possible, and I think I was probably caught somewhere in between knowing it was coming and it being forced upon me. And if you ever find yourself in that situation, I just encourage you to seek out support. Who could you speak to? What friends could be that sounding board, be that candid mirror that you need in that moment? Sometimes your partner or your wife is not the right person. And it might be a friend, it might be an old mentor, it might even be an old work colleague that you've worked with that could provide you with that support. And the other thing, the dealing with the pressure of the family, is that you'll get through it. In some ways, you'll come out stronger on the other side. And sometimes you do need to reinvent yourself. And that may be a changing career. But I think it's important to know that the value that you are now, and it's something that I try and remind myself as regularly as possible of the value that I bring to people. And redundancy it happens, it can happen to anyone. And I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. For some people, it's the greatest thing that could happen, because they get some money, they get opportunity to go and do something different. For me, I would say it was a bit of both. As I've said, what do I want you to take away from this? Is that know your value. Know that if you go through a period of redundancy, if you can, take control of your own destiny. If it comes as a complete surprise, try and take some time out for yourself before making your next move. And know that no matter what the outcome is, you are enough as yourself, who you are now. And that if you do need to change career, or need to even take a lesser role than what you're used to, that doesn't diminish your value. That doesn't diminish your enoughness. Where I am now, I have regrets of that period. And it's taken me probably longer to come through it than maybe it should have done. But I think I'm sharing this because I am coming through this period, or I've finished. I have turned the corner on this episode of my life. And it's been quite a long time. And you don't have to do that. If you put in that support and those boundaries, and you're going through this, you'll bounce back a lot quicker. And you'll feel more energized and more in control. And your confidence will still be strong. I hope you found this helpful and useful for me sharing this story with you. And if you want to know more, please subscribe and hit the notification button. Wish you a good day.